Welcome to another edition of an oral history of the Hudson County Bar Association. All our guests are special, and for me, this guest is really special for a couple of reasons. One, I used to work for him for a couple of years. He taught me a lot of little things in terms of political panache, if you want to call it that. And James Cagney really never had it over him because he was born on the 4th of July, 1929. Welcome, Jim Dugan.
Thanks, Lennon.
I'll give you an even better introduction. He was a state Democratic chairman. He was an assemblyman. He was a law director in our modern history of Bayonne municipal government, assembly person, and the beat goes on. And there's no governor, other than maybe some of the Republicans. Tom Kaine was a good friend of yours.
Yeah.
Who would not stop by and talk to Jim and say, "Can you give me? I'll genuflect and give me a blessing for governor." But anyway, Jim's been an attorney for longer than a lot of you weren't even born. But anyway,
Len, the highlight of my career was monitoring you and bringing you into the profession.
Well, you did a great job. I think we had 6 conversations in 2 years, but every one was worth it because I'd be driving a car down to Trenton. There was some bill he was interested in, and all I had to do was just absorb the conversations with this one or this one or this one. I said, this guy really knows his stuff. And I remember Jerry English calling you one day, and first thing out is, I can't remember, it was either Mr. Chairman or or a senator, and we were already out of office. And I said, that's really damn good respect. You're out of office, and people still respect you. And it's amazing because people to this day say, "Okay, Mayor, I'm not, but you are. I guess you never lose your title."
Yeah, certainly Mayor. You never lose.
I did lose, but I never lose the title.
When I think of Mayor, I think of Len Kishak.
Oh no, you thought of Mayor Fitzpatrick. He was the start. He was the beginning.
He was a significant influence on me getting started.
Well, let's go back to your career. You started out, if I remember correctly, you told me you spent about 2 years in New York before you came and settled in Bayonne. You did some cases in New York.
Oh, I did.
Did you remember that?
I had a New York license before I was licensed in New Jersey, and one of my classmates, we went to Fordham Middle School.
G. Gordon Liddy.
G. Gordon Liddy was in my class, and I've known him for a long time.
That's a whole nother story. Funny.
It is. But there was a classmate, Mike Larkin, who never, rose above the pack, but was a very good lawyer and a good friend of mine. So we formed a firm, and we flipped the coin, and it turned out to be Larkin and Dugan. And we had one of those addresses over in Wall Street where we got our mail and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And a woman who lived in Staten Island found me, and her principal activity seemed to be she was forever falling in a New York transit facility. and it was very easy to get their attention and settle a case because there was so much of that. But that was the extent of my practice in New York.
So how did you get into the change of government happened in '61, and the election was '62. Fitzpatrick was the first modern mayor of the city of Bayonne. But back then, you had Newark changing government, you had Jersey City changing government, Union City, West New York, North Bergen, they're still in the old commission form, but a lot of towns post-World War II is now moving into an executive and I guess board of directors, meaning council kind of form of government.
Yeah, you have to stay current, and you have to do what works. And the commission form of government wasn't really serving the people of Bayonne, and it was time for a change. And the wheel keeps turning, and it may
Well,
be.
there were 5 slates, I think, running at that time, or something close to that.
Yeah. There would be 5 slates, like 5 members, and it would you would cherry pick whatever one you wanted, and it was seldom that one slate elected everybody. It usually was 2, and 1 from 3 different slates.
I was coming out of grammar school, going into St. Peter's Prep in the early 60s, mid 60s, and other than the crazies that we have, every town has their fair share. I always thought that the government was pretty held well without a lot of controversy, in the sense that when you started in 62, there was a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who still had the commission form thinking, but now they had to do your role was different. And I remember Dennis Collins saying, I was kind of like a public works director, but I had to realize I'm not going to be that because I'm really a council person.
Yeah.
So, so you were the law director for how many years?
6.
6, and then you were when were you elected?
Then I went to the legislature.
You're in the assembly, and that was what, 68 or thereabouts.
Thereabouts. I served 1 term there,
and then you went into the Senate.
Then I went into the Senate and served 2 terms.
And you wound up being the Senate Judiciary Chairman.
Yeah.
And tell us about that, because that's a unique role in a lot of states.
It is. The jurisdiction of that committee is very large. We we pass on all the major appointments of the governor. We hold hearings on really the important legislation that has its genesis in the laws that we have.
Like if it had some constitutional impact, for example?
Yes.
But you had prosecutors, you had the judges. Do you have the lower judges? You had county judges back then, so
we did.
You had more than just Superior Court judges.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you had so many, and I remember going to a court, say in Bergen County or Passaic County, coming back and say, Jim, Judge so-and-so said hi. I said, who? Because they knew that you had to vote on maybe their initial or their confirmation after 7 years.
Yeah, and it was really fascinating, and it was something that I cherished as a lawyer. I got a lot of self-satisfaction out of my public service. I really did. I knew when it was time to leave and move on.
But see, that's a dimension that lawyers have. And then I think in a very unique way, especially in the capacity that you serve, that I shouldn't say normal, everyday people don't have it. In that profession, you do have that.
Yeah, you do.
And I know in my time, the people in Hudson County, looked at you as almost the king. I wouldn't say the king of Hudson County, but there was so much influence that you had on things that were going on in the county, and showed the respect.
Yeah, well, it is. You get a lot of self-satisfaction out of it. There are a couple of rules that you have to abide by. You can't do the job properly and with success if you're only concerned about re-election. I did. I voted my conscience and my judgment on everything. I didn't go around broadcasting that, but that's the way I navigated through public life, and I think it improved the legislative product that I was involved in.
Well, what you just evoked was kind of an ism for lawyers. That is, if you know your client's full of crap, either you tell them or you tell them, I ain't going to be able to argue that for you because, it's just not going anywhere. And don't waste my time, and you're not going to embarrass me in front of the judge by me saying this before him when the judge can see it right through.
Sure.
And it's funny because in politics, and we've had some real raucous campaigns. We had a presidential campaign recently where there's a lot of mistrust on both sides, but it's one is very experienced politically, and the other one having zero experience politically in the business area. But there have been a number of articles leading up to the election that would say, it's a lot of it's cat and mouse in the political arena because you don't want to show all your cards.
Oh.
If it's 5 cards, you're going to show 2. You can't show the other 3 because you want to have a little bit of a tease, and unless there's an agreement on both sides, there's some element of deniability, I guess, in terms of what your position is. And if it works, everybody wins.
Well, I don't mean to say that I adopt Hillary Clinton's. You have public opinion and private opinion. Whether you're
but you're in the political arena. You can't tell the Ruskies or the Chinese. You can't tell them. I've got 15 missiles when I really have only 2.
I think she was making reference to the Wall Street fellas.
Yeah, I know that.
And the Bayonne guys. But in any event, it was a great life being a lawyer, and I always wanted to be a lawyer. I was stimulated and encouraged by a lot of people, to whom I'm very grateful for. My mother and father,
and
from the beginning.
No, you had a great growing up in St. Vincent's Church at the parish uptown, and your sisters and everybody going on. Your dad was, I knew your dad more than I knew your mom, but it's just, you know what? Every community, whether you were in Jersey City, North Bergen, Union City, and you've been through all of them in your political life or even legal life, the sense of community was something that was always precious to where we were.
Yeah.
And it always made us what we are. And there was also a column recently. It says, my relationship with my neighbor is more important than their politics.
Yeah.
And that's the way we always were.
Yeah.
You could be on that side or that side, but you know what? We're still neighbors.
Yeah.
And we have to live as neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many mixed emotions that I have that you brought up. How you deal with different situations, and how you deal, in some instances, with an undercurrent of the knowledge of the law that we have that enables us to do so many things. And I can remember probably my first title of lawyer was when I was in the service.
Oh, you're a Purple Heart, aren't you, Jimmy?
Yeah,
You're wounded. You're wounded from the Korean War.
Yeah, I was an officer in the Marine Corps. That was a great experience too. A little frightening, maybe a little bit more.
I
than
remember in the
calculated.
office, the DMZ zone. I mean, it's still, right here.
Well, when I was recuperating from the wounds I picked up, I spent a lot of time in St. Albans Hospital.
In Staten Island?
Yeah, and Long Island.
Long Island, rather.
And then I had about 5 months left to go on my tour. So I wanted to get out, so I got a transfer down to Quantico, on limited duty in one of the training camps, and I was appointed the legal officer. So that was my first legal undertaking, and it was something else. But in any event, I've always been that. a lawyer.
And you're still Hudson County lawyer with McPherson and Secaucus. Originally, they were in Jersey City for many years. And a little side, Kenny McPherson recruited me, but I went with Jim Dugan.
Good choice.
Good choice. Kenny calls me up and said, "Yeah, I'm not going to steal you from Jim."
and Len, it's obvious with the back and forth between those. We had a lot of fun too.
Oh, absolutely. To this day. And I'm not going to talk about how many secretaries I stole from him when he left Bayonne. And I didn't tell you. I'm Jimmy. John Hughes and I are like in the same building now.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh. And when you talk about those years and how I heard some of the interview you had just prior to taking this on, and you were talking about the old days, and one of the things that I thought of how different the collegiality was, or the absence of it, maybe now. I can remember when I was in Bayonne, had my own shop before your arrival. And I got a call one day after I had been there about 2 or 3 years from the assignment judge, Judge Artisers.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy
Peter.
Flynn worked for Artisers, yes.
And the principal assignment judge, the principal judge in the Hudson County.
Yeah, number one.
Called me up and said, "Jim, you have, you're on the calendar too much. You got too much work. You can't handle all of that. And you need help."
And I said,
he said, "Yes, I'm sending Jim Flynn down to your office on Monday." And that was not unusual. To have the collegiality and
you're absolutely right,
and the affection and respect that you had for one another.
It's happened to me within this last year a handful of times, and I can't tell you how refreshing it is.
Yeah.
Because nobody does that. But on occasion, when that call comes in, you're going to take it. And you're all of a sudden say, now I'm dealing with a person, not just an icon or someone behind a bench, and it's real stuff.
Yeah.
And I have to safely say that my writing skills were not all that great. I worked for 5 years at J.P. Morgan in the city of New York before I joined you, and they really weren't great. And Jim Flynn taught me, because you're always busy, how to distill what the IRS would put in 2 pages into 4 sentences.
Yeah.
Jim was just and he would read 22 folios of transcripts from a trial and get down to exactly where he had to hone in for a legal issue. But it took those couple of years being with you and Jim, and it's carried me through the day for all these years. And I have to say thank you.
I was truly saddened when he passed away so prematurely.
It really was, and he was so proud of his kids all becoming lawyers, and I remember his oldest son Jim going to Harvard. And he was trying to drive up there when he was on the wrong side of the Hudson River. He told me until he realized he had to cross over the Tappan Zee Bridge. Kind of things like that made him so human.
Yeah.
A judge's lawyer almost, and R.I.P. But he was a lion, and maybe someday we can honor him through memories of him. Something like this. So
he was,
and he loved the Hudson County Bar Association, no question about it. He was really the first day I was in your office. Come on, Lenny, we got to go down to a meeting. Yeah, we got to go there. And I remember your former classmate Dick Connors, may he rest in peace, sitting across from me. And I said, "He's the judge."
Well, I had the honor of bringing to the governor's attention several lawyers that I thought deserved and would enhance the bench. And I brought several of those nominees to the governor's attention, and fortunately, he agreed with me.
It's and Brendan Byrne is still kicking around in his days. It was funny because I mentioned Dick Connors, and I saw him, and his daughter and wife were very active in the YWCA of Hudson County, as my wife was. But he tells me the story about a judicial conference in Las Vegas, and you were there on something, and you walk by, and he says, Jim, it's me. He said, oh, hi, Dick. He says, very nonchalantly, like, so what? I'm walking down the street, so I'm in Las Vegas, so what's the big deal?
we were classmates in St. Peter's Prep.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that I cherished. Just growing up in Bayonne was a pleasure.
St. Vincent's was one of the icons of the community, as were a lot of other places. The churches that were our stable areas. Yeah. Father Wertica, for example, was an icon throughout the city and in Jersey City. But being a lawyer, and I think what's great, and we had people like Greg Farmer, and you had a statewide practice, continue to have a statewide practice, but it's still, like Tip O'Neill would say, all lawyers' practices are local.
Yeah.
It's and when I think back when I started with you, that I was dealing with my grandparents' contemporaries, and now I'm dealing with my contemporaries' grandchildren. It's 5 generations.
Yeah.
It's when you think about it, and like Jim Flynn was a Hoboken guy, right? And my first partner came from Passaic. They had to learn the relationships.
Yeah.
And even when I was married, I'd have to sit down with them, and they would say, okay, tell me about this family. Tell me about what's wrong with this kid, or what's wrong with this, who screwed up here. And we knew it because we grew up with it.
Yeah.
Or we knew the families. We knew them by first name, second name, third name. We knew the nicknames.
Yeah.
We knew Juches. We knew all the things that go with that.
Yeah.
And like seeing like Dave Cathcart and your dad jumping the car to start him with the cables.
Yeah. And you mentioned many things that you mentioned this afternoon. Tip O'Neill.
Yeah.
Very close friend of mine, and he was a joy to be with.
And you think, during the last campaign, there were so many references between Reagan and Tip.
Yeah.
Being that they're two opposite sides, but they got along. They got a lot of things done. It was probably one of the most productive times that in our recent memory, and that was back in the 80s until George won. Amazing that what they saw, the Bush family couldn't go with their nominee, but Tip, and again, what I said before, all politics is local, and I think it finally came to a point where we're diversified now, in that so many things are from your phone or your iPad, or they get their information from the cloud as opposed to reality. And as many as our kids are of that age, our grandchildren too are of that age where everything is digital, and you and I will still sit and want that newspaper in our hands. I want to save the article. Because that's what we grew up with, and the newspaper becomes reality more than the digital.
Yeah.
And we could rest our eyes a little bit easier. You put the newspaper down, pick it up when you need to, and been some good stuff. In fact, the Times before the election had a really great. I almost read the Sunday Review, like from not exactly cover to cover, but there's some really meaty things. And one that you would have enjoyed, from a guy named Jonathan Rausch, talked about how old style politics got a lot done.
Yeah.
It got a lot done, even though what we talked about earlier in terms of negotiating, you can't put all your cards out on the table, but that the old smoky backroom politics got a lot done.
It absolutely did.
And I know, and you know, that when it came to putting people in a spot, there were always 10 other people lined up that are going to be, mad at you that you picked this one. And quite frankly, when I look at my successor, how many of my board appointees stayed for years and years and years because I spent time and I said, this one's better qualified. Planning, zoning, school board, whatever it was. And the last thought was when someone came up to me, the Jersey Journal reporter came up to me and says, well, what kind of experience does Mr. Conahan have as school board president? I said, how much experience did you have as your first day as a newspaper reporter? And he looked at me and said, well, okay. And, you bring your experience. And Patty was wonderful even as municipal judge. So I'm going to get him one of these days. But Jim, thanks. This was enjoyable.
Well, touching people's lives. Are we done?
Yeah.
We're done already?
Yeah.
Who was being interviewed? Jeez, I learned a lot listening to you, Mayor.
It's a mutual thing.